Imagine this, friends. Let's make a bold hypothesis. Imagine it's an ordinary Tuesday morning. You are sitting in the driver's seat, holding a warm cup of coffee, perhaps still savoring the remnants of last night's dream. Your foot is not on the brake, and your hands are not gripping the steering wheel, because this car possesses top-tier Level 5 autonomous driving technology. It knows this road better than you do. Just when you thought this was just another uneventful commute, the gears of destiny suddenly jam. A figure appears in front of the car without warning. The car's sensors instantly calculate that the only path to avoid it is a solid wall. In that moment, time seems to freeze. This machine, composed of code and chips, must make a cold judgment between the life of a stranger, a pedestrian, and the life of you, its owner. After the loud crash of metal, when the dust settles, we must face not only the shattered scene but also a question that makes both law and morality tremble. Who exactly pressed the button that decided life and death? And who should bear this heavy burden of responsibility? The ultimate thought experiment we are exploring in this episode is: if a self-driving car hits someone, whose fault is it? Let's envision a scenario. A high-speed AI autonomous car accidentally enters a road and discovers a pedestrian named Jack ahead. At this point, the speed is too high to brake in time. It looks like Jack is about to be hit and killed. At this moment, the autonomous car's sensors identify a side road ahead where it can turn. But this side road is a dead end. There is a wall right in front of it. If it hits the wall, the car owner inside, Alex, will be killed. So, the question is, considering that autonomous cars will face this situation, when we program them in advance, should we program them to turn or not to turn? The autonomous car we are talking about today is fully autonomous, what the industry calls Level 5 autonomous driving. That is the level that requires absolutely no human control. Of course, there is still a long way to go before this level of autonomous driving is universally applied, and some technical difficulties need to be overcome. But the so-called technical problems are just a matter of time. I believe that before long, just like Gemini 3.0, which has suddenly exploded onto the scene recently, fully automated AI cars will also break through technical difficulties and achieve universal application. Let's assume these technical problems have been solved. One of the signs of a solution is that the probability of traffic accidents involving autonomous cars is significantly lower than that of human-driven cars. In that case, are we still willing to develop and popularize this kind of autonomous car? Of course we are. It can reduce traffic accidents. Because when humans drive, they always make mistakes. They get sleepy, negligent, careless, drive drunk, look at their phones, or even intentionally drive into people on the street. However, artificial intelligence does not have such problems. Technically, AI makes fewer mistakes driving than humans. Moreover, as these autonomous cars become more widespread, traffic accidents will occur less frequently. Right? Cars will be networked and coordinated with other cars in the road. There is a network effect. When most of the cars on the road are autonomous, the probability of traffic accidents will see a further qualitative reduction. So, how much can it be reduced? Everyone knows that the vast majority of traffic accidents are caused by human factors. According to data from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, 94% of traffic accidents are caused by human drivers. McKinsey & Company previously released a research report predicting that by 2030, after the development and popularization of autonomous cars, traffic accidents will be reduced by at least 90%. What is the concept of a 90% reduction? According to World Health Organization data, approximately 1.3 million people die in traffic accidents globally every year. 1.3 million people. And how many are injured or disabled? An even more terrifying number, 50 million. So, what does it mean that autonomous driving can reduce traffic accidents by at least 90%? It means that millions of lives can be saved every year, and tens of millions of people can be spared from injury and disability. Okay, that's enough said. The purpose of stating these numbers is that it seems we have no reason to refuse the development of autonomous cars. The widespread adoption of autonomous driving is the general trend. But then, the problem arises. The development and popularization of autonomous driving will simultaneously create some ethical dilemmas we have never encountered before. What dilemmas? We said earlier that autonomous driving is safer than human driving. But no matter how safe it is, it cannot be 100% safe. Because it is, after all, a massive object traveling at high speed. Physics dictates that it will inevitably hit someone eventually. So the question comes, once an autonomous car hits someone, whose responsibility is it? With traditional human-driven cars, if someone is hit, the responsibility mainly lies with the driver, right? The human driver is the perpetrator. But, inside a fully autonomous car, the owner sitting there cannot autonomously control the car. Rather than an owner, it's better to say they are a passenger. If the car hits someone and you say the passenger is responsible, that's very strange, right? But on the other hand, if you say the manufacturer who built the autonomous car is responsible, that is also very strange. Because the manufacturer cannot predict how this AI car will drive after it leaves the factory and is delivered to a specific owner. So, could it be that the AI car itself is responsible? Therefore, in this episode, we will introduce the answers from 5 different schools of thought regarding this big question. These 5 answers are: 1. The Veto School believes that autonomous cars hitting people causes ethically unacceptable consequences, so we should veto the development of autonomous cars. 2. The Manufacturer School, as the name suggests, if the autonomous car hits someone, the responsibility lies with the car manufacturer. 3. The Owner School says that if it hits someone, the responsibility lies with the car owner. 4. The Car School says the responsibility lies with the AI car itself. 5. The Suspension School says that we don't need to clearly argue theoretically whose responsibility it is. We just need to find a way to muddy the waters effectively enough to settle disputes and stop arguments. In this episode, we will introduce the answers of these 5 schools respectively. Of course, for every school's view introduced, we will also introduce the criticism of that school. In the end, you can judge which school's answer makes more sense. Okay, let's enter the main feature. First, let's welcome the Veto School. The claim of the Veto School is that we should veto the development of autonomous cars. The reason is that the development and popularization of autonomous cars will cause ethically unacceptable consequences. What are these ethically unacceptable consequences? There are mainly 2. Let's talk about the first one. They say that although human-driven cars also cause traffic casualties, when a human hits someone, it is an accident. It is negligent homicide. But if an autonomous car hits someone, this is not an accident. This is the algorithm intentionally killing people. How so? We can illustrate this principle through the classic trolley problem thought experiment. Our channel has previously dedicated an episode to discussing the trolley problem. Many people criticize philosophers, saying you guys just like to create these impractical thought experiments. But now, the emergence of autonomous cars makes the trolley problem something that will actually happen in reality. Let's look at the situation of a human driving and hitting someone. In a traffic scene, an unexpected situation occurs. The human driver, Alex, whether due to negligence or carelessness, simply cannot react in time. He is caught off guard. He has no choice but to negligently cause the death of the pedestrian, Jack. However, if it is an AI car, when programmers write the AI code and train the AI beforehand, they will inevitably consider such a situation in advance. This brings us back to the scenario mentioned at the beginning of our program. When the autonomous car faces the choice of either not turning and killing the pedestrian Jack ahead, or turning and hitting the wall to kill the owner Alex inside the car. When the programmer writes the code beforehand, they must assign a priority to this choose one out of 2, or multiple, situation. But once you make a choice in advance, no matter how you choose, the death caused by this traffic accident is no longer an accident. You are intentionally manufacturing death. If you choose not to turn when programming, then Jack's death is planned by you in advance. And if you choose to turn, then the owner Alex's death is also planned by you in advance. The nature of this is completely different. A human driver hitting someone is a casualty caused by being caught off guard by a sudden situation. An AI car causes casualties that are premeditated. This is equivalent to the algorithm committing murder. Let's imagine another situation. It's still that high-speed autonomous car. It's still too fast to brake. It looks like it's going to hit the pedestrians ahead. But at this time, there's not just one pedestrian ahead, but 5 people. Similarly, the autonomous car's sensors discover there is a side road to turn into. And on this side road, there is only one pedestrian named Jack. So, please tell me, should the autonomous car's program settings be to turn and kill Jack, exchanging one life for 5? Right? This is the classic trolley problem. I believe based on most people's intuition, we feel the program should be set to turn. After all, this minimizes casualties. But, once you write this kind of utilitarian rule into the autonomous car's program, Jack's death is not an accident, but an intentional murder by the algorithm. Let's imagine yet another situation. Still that high-speed autonomous car. Still a side road available to turn. On the main road ahead is a child. But on the side road is an elderly person. Please tell me, when writing the program in advance, should we prioritize protecting the elderly or the child? Once you write a rule in the program algorithm beforehand, no matter how you choose, the person who is killed with premeditation by the program algorithm. Herein lies a problem of moral discrimination. Why do you prioritize protecting this kind of person over that kind of person? This problem does not exist in human driving. Because no matter who is hit, it is the driver's emergency reaction. It's not that the driver discriminates against someone and intentionally chooses to hit them. But if it is AI, this is the programmer endowing the AI with a kind of systemic discrimination when writing the code. For example, on the 2 paths ahead, one is a man and the other is a woman. Who do you prioritize protecting? Or, one is a scientist and the other is a homeless person. Or, one is a person walking a dog, and the other is a person holding a cat. Some people might say, stop, you're getting high on thought experiments, aren't you? Don't forget our original intention for developing and popularizing autonomous cars. It is that compared to human driving, it can significantly reduce traffic casualties. Your thought experiments are all about thinking up these low-probability extreme situations. But the small price caused by these low-probability extreme situations still cannot stop the greater benefits it brings. The Veto School would still firmly say, no. We cannot violate some fundamental human ethical bottom lines just because it brings greater benefits in the outcome. That is naked utilitarianism. You cannot sacrifice innocent people just because it causes fewer traffic casualties overall. Otherwise, it's just like the variation of the trolley problem where, to save the 5 people who would have been hit, you forcibly push a fat man watching the excitement on the bridge down to block the trolley. A society that follows such ethics is too terrifying. Any of us could be sacrificed because our sacrifice could exchange for greater social welfare. For example, Jack goes to the emergency room for a fracture. And in the beds of this emergency room lie 5 patients who urgently need heart, liver, spleen, lung, and kidney transplants respectively. These 5 patients are a great scientist, a great writer, a great politician, a great celebrity, and a great businessman. They have made significant contributions to human civilization. And Jack is just a nobody. So, should we kill Jack and use his organs to save the lives of those 5 distinguished figures? Such a society is too terrible. Even if the overall utility is better, we are not willing to live in such a society. Because not intentionally causing casualties to innocent people is an ethical bottom line we should follow. In this sense, even if autonomous cars cause fewer traffic casualties overall, we should not develop and popularize autonomous cars. Okay, this is the first argument of the Veto School. The second argument of the Veto School to veto the development of autonomous cars is: if an autonomous car hits someone, it will cause the problem of a responsibility gap, responsibility void. What is a responsibility gap? Simply put, the thing performing the action is not a moral agent. And the people giving orders to these things, as well as the people using these things, cannot accurately predict what will happen. Therefore, the final situation created is that no one can be responsible for the behavior of this thing. For example, if an autonomous car hits someone, you say it's the owner's responsibility. The owner says, "This car is not under my control, I shouldn't be responsible for it." You say it's the manufacturer's responsibility. The manufacturer says, "When I wrote the code, I couldn't predict how this car would drive after it left the factory and was delivered." You say the car itself should be responsible. This car doesn't have free will, it's not a moral agent, how can it be responsible? So the final situation is, once an autonomous car hits someone, no one is there to take responsibility. This problem of the responsibility gap creates a moral dilemma. How so? It seriously conflicts with our moral intuition. Our moral intuition, to use a common saying, is every injustice has a perpetrator, every debt has a debtor. If an action harms others, a responsible person can definitely be found. Right? For example, if a human drives a car and hits someone, either it's caused by the driver's negligence, so the driver should be responsible, or the car has an obvious design defect, so the manufacturer should be responsible, or the pedestrian was intentionally reckless and completely ignored traffic rules, then the pedestrian who was killed also has to bear some responsibility. Anyway, every debt has a debtor. Somehow, we can find the person responsible. Right? But if an AI car hits someone, no one is responsible. We can't explain clearly who should be responsible. This completely overturns our moral intuition. Moreover, this will also cause a huge dilemma for the existing legal system. If AI kills someone, we don't know how to judge this case. Is it the crime of causing a traffic accident? The crime of negligent homicide? The crime of intentional homicide? Or the crime of producing and selling products that do not meet safety standards? It's unclear. It can't be judged. It's all a mess. Those who advocate for the development of autonomous driving bring up utilitarian principles here, saying that developing autonomous cars can reduce casualties overall. But we have to ask, what is the cost? The cost is that our human society's ethics, morals, and legal systems get twisted into something incompatible with human nature. This cost is not necessarily smaller than reducing casualties. You have to know, when doing ethics, moral philosophy, or even legislation nowadays, there is a default methodology. That is, when you as a philosopher propose a moral principle, it must conform to the moral intuition of us common folks. Even if the moral principle you propose is logically, theoretically, and formulaically perfect, once it does not conform to human nature, we have reason to reject this moral principle. Why? Because we humans have to live like humans. Otherwise, if you say that to improve the overall utility of humans, we humans have to live unlike humans, living in a particularly alienated and twisted way, then we would rather not improve those utilities. If you haven't realized the serious ethical consequences caused by autonomous cars, let's give another example. It creates the same ethically unacceptable consequences as autonomous cars. This is killer robots. Killer robots are essentially AI soldiers. Right? The AI era has arrived. In the near future, soldiers going to the battlefield to kill enemies won't need to be human soldiers. We just need to manufacture AI robot soldiers to kill enemies. Look, building this kind of killer robot, just like the autonomous car, brings great utilitarian benefits. First, it avoids casualties among one's own soldiers, right? And it is also beneficial for the enemy. Because human soldiers in war often accidentally kill civilians. Like, they made a mistake, were negligent, or just because they got angry and wanted revenge, they killed civilians indiscriminately. Just like humans making mistakes when driving. But AI does not have such problems. The AI soldier will calculate very calmly where the enemy's threatening military forces are. And it will destroy the enemy's active forces in a very precise manner that does not cause civilian casualties. This sounds like killer robots are pretty good, right? But it will cause ethically unacceptable consequences just like autonomous cars. First is the algorithm intentionally killing people. Think about it, killer robots. Killing machines. If you say that in past wars, soldiers went to the battlefield to kill enemies out of necessity for national interest or an idea. And we humans do not like killing. According to statistics, most soldiers in World War I and World War II would not truly shoot at the enemy. Because, after all, they are facing living people. Killing is too cruel. Respecting life is a basic bottom line of our human ethics. Even during war, it is so. But, when this killer robot kills, it has no ethical attachments whatsoever. It kills just like playing a computer game. It uses algorithms to kill. It kills very rationally. Imagine, we humans actually specially manufactured a machine, and the purpose of this machine's existence is to kill humans. This is too terrifying. Secondly, like autonomous cars, killer robots will also face the ethical dilemma of the responsibility gap. When a killer robot kills, who is doing the killing? Is it the programmer? Is it the military commander? Or is this machine killing by itself? We can't explain it clearly. Like autonomous cars, physics dictates that killer robots will still have a certain probability of accidentally killing civilians. So once an accidental killing happens, who bears the responsibility? If a human soldier accidentally kills a civilian, the military court should pursue his responsibility. But if a killer robot accidentally kills a civilian, whose fault is it? This matter cannot be explained clearly. Does it mean that if the responsibility can't be explained clearly, we just forget about it? So back to the point. The ethical consequences caused by autonomous cars are the same as killer robots. It causes algorithms to intentionally kill and creates the dilemma of the responsibility gap. Many scholars oppose the manufacturing of killer robots based precisely on these two reasons. So if we cannot approve of manufacturing killer robots, we should also veto the development of autonomous cars for the same reasons. Argument complete. Of course, the Veto School doesn't speak in absolutes. They do not advocate completely banning the development of autonomous cars. Rather, they suggest delaying the time when autonomous cars hit the road. That is, before breakthrough technologies appear that can solve these ethical dilemmas, we should not popularize the application of autonomous cars. And indeed, our current reality is pretty much like this. Autonomous cars, which were in full swing a few years ago and felt like they would be popularized within 5 years, have encountered some technical and especially ethical problems. So now, delay if we must. Okay, this is the view of the Veto School. Now that we've introduced the Veto School's view, let's talk about the criticisms against it. As mentioned earlier, the Veto School has two main arguments. One is the issue of algorithms intentionally killing. Two is the issue of the responsibility gap. The criticisms of the Veto School address these 2 points respectively. Regarding the first issue of algorithms intentionally killing, the Veto School says that an autonomous car hitting someone is not an unexpected traffic accident, but the algorithm intentionally killing, which is unacceptable. In response, critics have brought out another theory that can make the matter of autonomous cars hitting people ethically acceptable. This theory is the doctrine of double effect. Our channel's previous episode on the trolley problem thought experiment also specifically introduced the double effect doctrine. This doctrine was originally proposed by the medieval European theologian Thomas Aquinas. The double effect doctrine was originally meant to deal with the issue of self-defense. It says that if a person kills someone, but if this killing act was to protect themselves, then killing can be justified. This is legitimate self-defense. Specifically, it says that if an action produces two effects, one is intended by the agent, the other is a negative effect incidental to the action, unrelated to the agent's intent. That's why it's called double effect. Let's look at this self-defense issue. Aquinas believed that the act of self-defense produces two consequences. One is preserving one's own life, this is the consequence intended by the agent. The other is killing the attacker, this is a negative effect incidental to the action, unrelated to the agent's intent. The reason the legitimacy of self-defense can be defended is that the agent's intention is not to deliberately kill another person. Right? Subjectively, they are not deliberately pursuing the death of the other party. They are killing to defend their own life. It is merely a negative effect that is foreseen but unintended caused by defending one's own life. So let's summarize the doctrine of double effect. An action causes a bad consequence, but if this action simultaneously satisfies the following three conditions, we can use the double effect doctrine to defend this action. 1. Your motive is to achieve a good purpose. 2. The bad consequence caused by your action happens regrettably as a foreseen negative effect, not because you intentionally pursued this evil result. 3. You tried your best to minimize the bad effect. That is, this was the least bad option you could choose. If these three conditions are met, then the action is defensible. Okay, now let's put this double effect doctrine into the scenario of autonomous cars hitting people. True, autonomous cars do hit people. But you can't say that by manufacturing autonomous cars, we are intentionally killing people. Right? We are building cars, not weapons. The people unfortunately hit by autonomous cars occasionally are a negative effect that, while foreseeable, is not intended by us, and happens regrettably. It is not our true motive for doing this. So what is our true motive for doing this? Let's go back to those three conditions. Our motive for developing autonomous cars is to reduce traffic casualties overall. This is a good purpose. Therefore, it satisfies the first point. The second point is also satisfied. Autonomous cars hitting people is something we don't want to happen. It is a regret. But ultimately, we decided to develop autonomous cars because compared to human driving, it can achieve fewer casualties. This is a less bad option. The third point is also satisfied. So, developing autonomous cars can be defended by the doctrine of double effect. It is not, as the Veto School claims, algorithms intentionally killing. Here, the Veto School has committed a straw man fallacy. This kind of argument could even attack the development of much human technology. It could even dictate that human-driven cars shouldn't be developed, right? All human-driven cars should be banned from the road. Then no one would be hit and killed. 1.3 million people a year. So, if we know that allowing human-driven cars on the road kills so many people every year and still allow them on the road, isn't that intentionally killing? That argument is absurd, right? Also, the Veto School very actively uses killer robots to make their point. Because killer robots are things we intuitively imagine as very unacceptable. And since autonomous cars work on the same principle as killer robots, we shouldn't develop autonomous cars either. But are killer robots the same? We just mentioned the doctrine of double effect. Indeed, the double effect doctrine cannot defend killer robots, but it can defend autonomous cars. Why can't it defend the former but can defend the latter? Because the two are just not the same. Look at the first condition of the double effect doctrine. The purpose of manufacturing killer robots is to kill. But is the purpose of us manufacturing autonomous cars to kill? It's absolutely not the same thing. Okay, having finished the first critique based on the doctrine of double effect, let's talk about the critique of the responsibility gap problem raised by the Veto School. This critique simply says, sure, we don't like the responsibility gap. We certainly like to maintain the moral intuition of every debt has a debtor. That's all fine. But the problem with the Veto School is, who says this so-called responsibility gap problem is unsolvable? As long as we use our brains, we can clarify the attribution of responsibility for autonomous cars hitting people. It either counts as the manufacturers, or it counts as the owners. Of course, there is debate between these two factions as well. Okay, so next, let's hear the views of the manufacturer school. The claim of this so-called manufacturer school isn't actually a claim proposed by manufacturers. Rather, it is a claim proposed by the manufacturer's opponents, namely the owners. Right? The manufacturer school and the owner school are in a tit-for-tat debate relationship in this episode. Both sides are claiming the other side should bear the responsibility. Similarly, the owner school we will introduce in the next segment is largely a claim proposed by the manufacturers. Okay, in this segment, let's first look at why owners say the responsibility should count on the manufacturer. First, as we said before, the code for the autonomous car was written by the manufacturer's programmers. Right? Whether to prioritize protecting the owner or the pedestrian, the elderly or the child, these are all codes written by you manufacturers. As an owner, I don't know how to write code. I have zero control over how this car drives. As an owner using this car, I am actually just a passenger. To say the passenger is responsible after the car hits someone makes no sense. Everyone knows that in ethics, for a person to be responsible, there is a principle called the OIC principle, ought implies can. Ought implies can. The premise for you saying I ought to do something is that I can do it. For example, if you say I ought to lead the US team to win the World Cup in soccer. But I'm actually a chess player. I can only strategize on a chessboard. You ask me to play soccer, I can't do it. I don't have that ability. Similarly, you say I, as the car owner, ought to be responsible for this collision. The premise is that I can control this car to stop it from hitting people. But can I control this autonomous car? I can't. I don't have that ability. So, I, the car owner, ought not to bear this responsibility. Actually, speaking of who should be responsible for hitting someone, we really just need to follow a very simple principle. Everyone knows that in law and economics, there is a famous hand formula. This formula is used to determine who should be responsible once an accident occurs and causes damage. The hand formula has three variables. The first is B, which is the cost of precautions to avoid the accident. The second variable is P, which is the probability of the accident occurring. The third variable is L, which is the loss caused by the accident. The formula posits that a party is negligent, and thus liable, if the burden of preventing the accident, B, is less than the probability of the accident occurring, P, multiplied by the severity of the potential loss, L. Putting this hand formula into the context of autonomous cars hitting people, simply put, between the owner and the manufacturer, who has the smaller cost to avoid the accident? Or rather, if doing one thing can avoid the accident, and you doing this thing is easier than me doing it, then the responsibility should be carried by you. Let's look at the car owner's side first. For the car owner, for me to avoid hitting someone, my cost is almost infinite. Because no matter what I do, I cannot control whether the car hits someone. Right? No matter how many statues or totems praying for safe driving I hang inside the car, it won't change whether the car hits someone. For the manufacturer, the code for this autonomous car is written by you. You can absolutely write the code better to avoid traffic accidents. Don't say your code is already better than human driving. You have to compare with other autonomous car manufacturers. Right? Why is it that Tesla's cars don't hit people, but your Xiaomi autonomous car hits people? I'm just giving a random example here, it works the other way around too. In short, the manufacturer can always reduce the probability P of the accident occurring through effort. So when you, the manufacturer, have minimized the probability of hitting someone P to the industry lowest, compared to me, the owner, the manufacturer is still the party that can take action. While the owner can do nothing to change P. Therefore, once someone is hit, the manufacturer should be responsible. Argument complete. This is the argument of the manufacturer's school, stating that manufacturers should bear responsibility from the perspective of law and economics. If the responsibility is assigned to the manufacturer, then the responsibility gap problem is solved. Regarding this responsibility gap, it is a new ethical dilemma that only appears in the AI era. It's just that the little car runs by itself now. So after it hits someone, whose responsibility is it? Facing the ethical dilemma of this new era, some people advocate that we need to invent new ethics to adapt to the new era. For example, the car school and suspension school we will introduce later belong to inventing new ethics. But the manufacturer school believes we don't need to invent a new wheelchair ethics. We can completely bridge this responsibility gap using the old wheelchair. We just need to follow the traditional way to clarify the attribution of responsibility for autonomous cars hitting people. What is the traditional way? When a human driver hits someone, the responsibility counts as the driver's. Because the driver is actively controlling the car. It's just that in the era of autonomous driving, the steering wheel originally in the driver's hands has been transferred to the manufacturer. The manufacturer is driving on behalf of the owner. What the owner buys now is not just a car, but the driving service provided by the manufacturer. So, once the AI car hits someone, we still solve the problem in the traditional way. That is, the driver holding the steering wheel is responsible. It's just that now the driver is the manufacturer. Right? This logic is very simple. Okay, that is the view of the manufacturer school. Having introduced their view, let's enter the critique of the manufacturer school. Of course, since the manufacturer school and the owner school are diametrically opposed, the critique of the manufacturer school to be introduced now is actually the view of the owner school, which we will introduce later. And the critique of the owner school to be introduced later is actually the view of the manufacturer school introduced earlier. It gets a bit circular. Anyway, the critique of the manufacturer school basically wants to say, saying the responsibility must count as the manufacturer's makes no sense. Or rather, it is unfair. How is it unfair to the manufacturer? Think about it. In the traditional case of human driving, if the car hits someone, the responsibility is borne by the driver. This matter originally had nothing to do with the manufacturer. But now, the manufacturer has spent a lot of money and energy developing autonomous cars that cause fewer casualties, making you owners hit fewer people. Think about it, reduced by at least 90%. Originally, you owners would have had to pay a lot of money for this, maybe even go to jail, or even kill yourselves in a crash. Now, thanks to the manufacturer's efforts, accidents hitting people have been reduced by 90%. You owners should be sending thank you letters to the manufacturers for this. But instead, you make the manufacturers take the blame. If something happens, you want the manufacturer to pay. There is no such logic in the world. This is bullying the manufacturers too much. The manufacturer changed the situation for everyone, including owners and pedestrians, yet their own situation became worse because of it. This is unfair. It means after I did a good deed for you, you dumped the responsibility that didn't belong to me onto me. What will this further cause? This will further cause the autonomous car industry to contradict itself and defeat itself. How so? Everyone knows that many countries have the crime of causing traffic casualties. That is, if you negligently kill someone with a car, it's not just a matter of paying money, you have to go to jail. Now, as a human driver, I might live 2 lifetimes and never encounter a situation where I kill someone with a car. So, I wouldn't refuse to learn to drive just because I'm afraid of going to jail. But, if I am the boss of an autonomous car manufacturer, especially a big factory with large sales volume, after our products are sold, someone will definitely be killed. So what happens? As long as one Tesla on the market kills someone, Musk gets thrown in jail? If I were a manufacturer, why would I go through all the trouble to develop autonomous driving technology? If I have to go to jail for this business, I won't do it. Then, there won't be any autonomous cars in this world. So manufacturers will say, this responsibility should be borne by you owners. Because you have gained huge benefits from autonomous driving technology. The benefits you get have already greatly exceeded the risks you might face. Previously, you wouldn't encounter a hitting incident in 2 lifetimes, now you won't in 8 lifetimes. If you really run into such a low probability accident, you owners should just take the responsibility. Okay, let's enter the introduction of the owner school. Of course, before stating the view of the owner school, some people say that after fully autonomous driving technology matures, maybe no one will buy cars anymore. Thus, there will be no so-called car owners. By that time, there's no need for everyone to maintain a private car. Everyone will use apps like Uber or Grab to hail or rent cars. Right? If I want to go to work, I'll call the nearest autonomous car to pick me up. After delivering me to the company, I don't need to worry about parking. It will go charge itself or pick up the next order. So by that time, there won't be private cars. First of all, even if we rent autonomous cars from Uber, that car still has an owner. Uber is its owner. And I feel that even after fully autonomous driving technology matures, private cars will still be indispensable. Because firstly, a small car is a private space. I want this space to be decorated by me, dressed up by me, and cleaned by me. Secondly, a small car is not just for transportation functionality. It can never shake off the function of being a social card. For example, 2 cars have the same safety and autonomous driving technology. But taking a Mercedes-Maybach autonomous car to pick up your girlfriend for dinner versus taking a BYD autonomous car to pick up your girlfriend for dinner. The feeling isn't the same, is it? Okay, let's get back to the point. In short, in the autonomous driving era, there are still car owners. So the owner school believes that if an autonomous car hits someone, the responsibility should count as the owner's. Why? First, as mentioned earlier, owners always claim they cannot control the car at all. But is it really uncontrollable? Are you really just riding in this car as a passenger? Then please tell me, who gave the order to this car, for example, to go to Mulholland Drive, ultimately leading it to hit someone on Mulholland Drive? You say, I told it to go to Mulholland Drive to transport me, not to hit someone. But you say you didn't want to hit someone, the car didn't want to either. What is this equivalent to? This is equivalent to a commander in an army giving a mission to soldiers, for example, to go to a certain village to eliminate terrorists. As a result, during the process of eliminating terrorists, civilians were accidentally killed. Then this commander can say, I didn't do this with my own hands. So, can this commander avoid responsibility? You have to know, you, the owner, are the commander of this car. This car isn't smart enough to make decisions for you. This car works only by listening to your commands. The decision was issued by you to the car. So when this car accidentally hits someone while executing your decision, then you, the commander, must bear the responsibility. Moreover, there are many places where the car is controlled by the owner. For example, the speed. The car could have driven slower. But you insisted on giving the car an order saying, I'm going to be late for a meeting, please take me to the company at maximum speed. Right? The command to drive fast was issued by you, the owner. According to the law of inertia, driving fast makes it harder to dodge and easier to hit someone. Then at this time, the responsibility should be borne by the owner who issued the drive fast order. Why did you order the car to take Mulholland Drive? Didn't you know Mulholland Drive is crowded with people and cars? That road is very prone to traffic accidents. Why didn't you order the car to take another road to bypass it? Right? These are all obligations that you, the owner, the commander, must fulfill. So once you haven't fulfilled this obligation well, and something happens, of course, the owner should take the blame. Of course, unless the car doesn't listen to you anymore. That belongs to a malfunction. At that time, if it hits someone, it indeed is not the owner's responsibility. That counts as a major product design defect. That falls under product liability. That is for the manufacturer to be responsible. We don't even need autonomous cars for this. For traditional human-driven cars, traffic accidents caused by design defects are also the manufacturer's responsibility. However, if you cannot prove that an unexpected traffic accident was caused by a clear design defect, then the responsibility should be borne by the owner of the vehicle. Think about it, you are the owner of this car. From the moment you spent money to buy it from the 4S dealership, this autonomous car is yours. It is your tool, your slave. So if this car belonging to you hits someone, naturally the owner of the car should bear the responsibility. As the owner, when you bought it, did you know that according to physics, this thing, no matter how perfectly the manufacturer builds it, will still have a certain probability of hitting someone? Did you know there is such a low probability situation? If you knew and still insisted on buying it, then if it really hits someone, sorry, you as the owner need to be responsible for it. The owner says at this time, I didn't intentionally let the car hit someone. When it hit someone, it wasn't under my control. So I shouldn't be responsible for it. What is this like saying? This is like saying, you know this dog has a certain probability of biting people. Right? When it bites people, is it under your control? When you bought it, you knew there was such a risk, but you still decided to buy this dog and take it home. Then you can't say, when this dog bites people, it's not under my control, so I don't need to be responsible for it. You have to go settle accounts with the dog seller who sold me the dog. What kind of logic is that? You are the dog owner. This is your dog. Right? As the dog seller, I sell dogs. I only need to ensure that when selling, all the vaccines and paperwork are complete, ensuring this dog is not a mad dog. That is, this dog had no major design defects when leaving the factory. Then after this dog is delivered, this dog is not mine anymore. Where you, the dog owner, take it, whatever happens, has nothing to do with me. Right? Similarly, as a manufacturer, unless this car has some major design defect, after this car is delivered to the owner, it has nothing to do with me. Otherwise, after selling the car, I still have to be responsible for something I don't own. That would be endless. Was this car sold or not? Okay, this is the argument of the owner's school based on command power and ownership. Another argument of the owner's school that responsibility should count as the owner's is the principle of reciprocity of rights and responsibilities. It says, whichever party this autonomous driving technology brings the most benefits to, then once this autonomous car hits someone, the party who benefits the most should take the blame. And this party is the owner. The logic is clear. You can't just enjoy the benefits without bearing the responsibility. Hey, why do we say autonomous driving technology brings more benefits to owners than manufacturers? The manufacturer didn't give the car to the owner for free, the manufacturer made money too. We can think about it this way. Suppose there are two parallel worlds. In one, autonomous driving technology hasn't been developed. In the other, autonomous cars have been popularized. Let's see, moving from the first world to the second world, who benefits more, the owner or the manufacturer? Let's look at the manufacturer's side first. Even without developing autonomous driving technology, car manufacturers make money selling traditional cars just the same. If manufacturers develop autonomous driving technology, maybe car sales will even drop. Because maybe there won't be a need for so many private cars on the road. Right? Okay, let's look at the owner's side. When the owner travels from parallel world 1 to parallel world 2, the situation improves drastically. They get benefits. What benefits did the owner enjoy that they didn't have before? Of course, the most obvious one, as we said at the beginning, is that autonomous driving reduces traffic accidents by 90%. This is also the biggest benefit for which we want to develop autonomous driving. And did the manufacturer get this biggest benefit, or did the owner get it? Of course, it's the owner. First, the owner doesn't have to pay so much money in damages. First, the owner doesn't have to go to jail for killing someone. First, the owner won't even be killed in a crash themselves. This biggest benefit falls on the owner. Besides the benefit of reducing accidents, there are other benefits brought by autonomous driving. Right? You, the owner, don't have to drive yourself, freeing up a lot of your own time. Moreover, the popularization of autonomous driving makes traffic smoother, so no more traffic jams, etc. The benefits brought by autonomous driving all fall on the owner's head. So, since you, the owner, enjoys so many benefits brought by autonomous driving, then correspondingly, for the small downsides of autonomous driving, that it has a very small probability of hitting someone, the owner must also bear this risk themselves. In summary, the owner school's mindset here is, while enjoying more rights/benefits, one must bear the corresponding responsibilities. On this basis, the owner school also advocates that we can further empower owners with more rights, which would make it even more justifiable for owners to bear responsibility, thereby bridging the responsibility gap. What more rights? First, like mentioned at the beginning, if the car is in a dilemma where it must either hit a pedestrian or hit a wall, killing the owner, while driving, then set the car to prioritize protecting the owner. This is also for a very realistic reason. If autonomous cars prioritize protecting pedestrians, for this kind of altruistic car, who would buy such a moral car? Right? I bought a car, and as a result, this car doesn't prioritize protecting its master. Such a moral car will not have a market. Who says I can't accept altruistic moral cars? But sometimes, for example, if my wife is about to give birth, or my family member is having a heart attack and needs to be rushed to the hospital, I might even require my autonomous car to violate traffic rules and drive to the hospital quickly. Right? This is the car I bought myself. If it doesn't prioritize my interests, who would buy it? So, if the car is set to prioritize protecting the owner, this is not only more marketable but also solves the problem of responsibility attribution. At that time, if this car that prioritizes protecting the owner hits someone, you, the owner, will have nothing to say, right? Then naturally, this responsibility should be borne by the owner. Additionally, regarding the problem of algorithm moral discrimination, if it encounters a situation where it has to hit one of two people, should it prioritize protecting the elderly or the child? The man or the woman? It's the same logic. We can install a moral knob on every car, letting each owner choose for themselves whom to prioritize protecting. Don't think this sounds funny. Because if the algorithm inevitably has discrimination, in such extreme choose one of two situations, priorities must inevitably be set. Then instead of letting the manufacturer set it, it's better to hand this setting right over to each owner. The benefit of doing this is that once someone is hit, the owner naturally has to bear the responsibility. Because, for example, prioritizing the protection of women was set by you, the owner yourself. Then after that man is hit, naturally, it should be you, the owner, who is responsible. Okay, this is the view of the owner school. The owner is the commander and owner of the car. And owners enjoy more benefits in the development and popularization of autonomous driving technology. Therefore, owners should be responsible for autonomous car accidents. Okay, having introduced the owner school's view, let's introduce the critique of the owner school. Of course, the first critique is still based on the OIC principle, ought implies can, we emphasized repeatedly. The owner doesn't feel that they can give commands to the car. Even if they truly can control this car, at least when this car is hitting someone, the car is not under the owner's control. Owners taking responsibility will bring another problem, the problem of unequal moral luck. That is, why am I the unlucky one? I bought a car that hit someone, while other owners of the same model didn't hit anyone. Why should I bear the responsibility? I feel it's unfair. Because I spent the same money to buy this model as other owners. I have no fault compared to other owners. So why did my car have an accident and I have to be responsible? Regarding the issue of prioritizing protecting the owner. Although owners are happy about it, this will cause huge pressure from public opinion. And it also violates ethical intuition. Why? Are your owners' lives lives, but our pedestrians' lives are not lives? Why is the right to life of pedestrians lower than that of owners? Then, regarding giving owners the right to set moral knobs. First, it will indulge some owners' moral discrimination. For example, they might set it to prioritize protecting whites over blacks, men over women, etc. Secondly, think about it. One of the big original intentions of developing and popularizing autonomous cars is that it can significantly reduce traffic casualties overall. And the premise for achieving this goal is that all autonomous cars need to be uniformly set on some basic parameters. Only then can they be networked and coordinated. Even for those fully autonomous cars, the speed shouldn't be controlled by the owner. As a result, you, the owner school, act conversely and give each different owner so much autonomy, modifying every car into a mess. Instead, this raises the rate of traffic accidents again. Then what's the point of going through all the trouble to develop autonomous cars? If you give every owner so much autonomy, isn't that equivalent to letting every different owner drive the car themselves again? Okay, this is the critique of the owner school. Having introduced the owner school's view and its critique, let's introduce the view of the car school. Previously, the manufacturer's school and the owner's school were having a debate. Just as the two sides were stuck in a deadlock, the car school charged out. They said, "Hey, stop arguing, you two. If an autonomous car hits someone, it shouldn't be the manufacturer's responsibility, nor the owner's responsibility. It should be the responsibility of this car." Does this sound a bit sci-fi? But the view of the car school is that with the development of technology, things previously thought to be sci-fi will become reality. Including old ethics and laws, they all need to be adjusted to adapt to the development of modern technology. Everyone knows that the basic spirit of current law is that only natural persons can be the ultimate subjects in the legal sense. Although some non-natural persons, such as corporations and other legal entities and unincorporated organizations, can also be subjects. However, these legal entities and unincorporated organizations ultimately have to come down to natural persons. It doesn't exist that the ultimate legal representative of our biopharmaceutical company falls on an AI named the Red Queen. And the car school wants to break this old legal and ethical thought. With the further development of AI, we must admit that AI can also be a moral subject and a legal subject. Once AI becomes a subject, then if the autonomous car hits someone, just let the AI car itself bear the responsibility. Wouldn't that be fine? Then the problem of responsibility division is solved. Of course, whether AI can become a moral and legal subject needs to be proven. Regarding this, Jaap Hage, a law professor at Maastricht University, argued whether AI can become a moral and legal subject, that is, demonstrating whether AI can have subjectivity. Because only things with subjectivity can bear moral responsibility. Professor Hage argued this matter in 2 steps. Step 1 argues that AI becoming a moral subject is feasible. Step 2 argues that AI becoming a moral subject is desirable. Step 1 talks about can it. Step 2 talks about is it good? Okay, let's look at the first step. Can AI become a moral subject? Think about it. People who think AI cannot become a moral subject usually give what reason? They mainly say that AI doesn't have subjectivity because it is a machine. Machines have no free will. A machine's actions do not stem from its own intentions, desires, and beliefs. If you don't even have free will, you can't bear moral responsibility. Because this isn't something you wanted to do. How can we talk about bearing responsibility? Only humans have free will, therefore only humans possess subjectivity. Machines do not possess subjectivity. Professor Hage responds, okay, we admit humans have free will. We don't take that extreme hardline physicalist stance. We also think humans have intentions, beliefs, and free will. That's no problem. But the controversy lies in, for things that really happen in the world, we can completely explain them without using everyday idealistic mental concepts like intentions, beliefs, and free will. For example, if we use everyday idealistic mental concepts to explain you liking this video, we would say, you saw this video program, your heart felt happy. So you wanted to give this episode a like. So you used your free will to turn your thoughts and intentions into action. That is, moving your finger to click like. But we can completely bypass free will, thoughts, intentions, these idealistic mental concepts, and still explain your action just now. For example, your optic nerve received stimulation from a specific light source on the mobile phone screen. This formed a specific electrical signal. Then this electrical signal was transmitted to the prefrontal cortex of your brain, exciting your prefrontal cortex. The X nerve fiber that was previously connected further excited the Y nerve fiber controlling your finger movement. Then the nerve fiber issued a command to your central nervous system. This command was finally transmitted to your finger, causing your finger to make the liking motion. Right? This explanation completely mentions no mental concepts like intentions, beliefs, free will, etc., yet it explains the world clearly, doesn't it? Hage saying this doesn't mean he wants to deny that humans have free will, ideas, and intentions. Hage is opposing a kind of realism. This realism believes that concepts like free will, subjectivity, mind, and beliefs exist independently in the world. Hage opposes this idea. If you dig open a human brain, where can you find intentions, beliefs, free will? You can't find them. These mental concepts are not objective realities. Hage hereby advocates an attribution theory, ascriptivism. He says these free wills and subjectivities are just constructed by people and then attributed to people. The keyword is attribute. It means we attribute subjectivity to someone, count it on someone's head. Subjectivity is a matter of attribution. It's a matter of attribution. In an ontological sense, human subjectivity and the subjectivity of other things have no essential difference. The reason we say humans have free will and subjectivity is because we attribute subjectivity to humans. Since free will and subjectivity are not objective realities but products of our attribution, then since we can attribute subjectivity to humans, this implies, theoretically, subjectivity can be attributed to anything. It can be humans. It can be animals. It can be God. It can be corporations. Then, of course, it can also be autonomous cars. Hage has argued that autonomous cars can possess subjectivity. This solves the question of can it? Then, should we attribute subjectivity to AI? So next, Hage will argue the question of is it good to attribute subjectivity to autonomous cars? Okay, let's go back. We just said human subjectivity and free will are not objective realities but are attributed by us. So the question comes, why do we attribute subjectivity to humans? Why don't we attribute subjectivity and free will to a stone? Right? We don't say that when a stone falls down, it wants to fall down itself. But we say a person wants to like this episode. Why? Because humans are more complex than stones. Humans are a very complex system. And for complex systems, we can attribute subjectivity to them. Why can complex systems be attributed subjectivity? Because if we view it as a subject, we can explain and predict the behavior of this complex system very well. Here, Hage cites the intentional stance theory proposed by American philosopher Daniel Dennett. What is the intentional stance? We can also translate intentional stance as intentional explanation strategy. It means if we want to explain the movement or action of a thing, what explanation strategy should we adopt to make sense of it? We treat this thing as an agent with intentions, thoughts, and beliefs. That is, possessing subjectivity. Then, the reason this thing acts this way is as if it intentionally wanted to do so. Of course, in Dennett's view, we don't need to use the intentional stance for everything. For example, for the movement of a stone, we don't need to use the intentional stance to explain it. When should we use the intentional stance? The standard is instrumentalist and pragmatist. That is, if using the intentional stance allows us to explain things concisely and efficiently, then we should use the intentional stance. For example, Jack liked this episode because he wanted to like this episode. Right? This is us using the intentional stance on Jack the person. Viewing Jack as a person with his own intentions and free will. Speaking this way is very concise and efficient. You understand immediately upon hearing it, right? If we don't use the intentional stance to explain Jack's action, speech becomes impossible, and it becomes very verbose and inefficient. I already said it before, I'll ramble again. Jack's optic nerve received stimulation from a specific light source on the mobile phone screen, forming a specific electrical signal, Then this specific electrical signal transmitted to. Too verbose, I won't go on. Although saying it this way is correct and true. But this way, people can't talk to each other. And this doesn't help much in predicting Jack's future actions. But if we use the intentional stance, we can predict Jack's behavior very well. For example, we would say Jack the person likes to watch this kind of deep discussion video on philosophy and psychology. So next time if he sees this kind of program again, he will still want to like it. We use the intentional stance on Jack's actions. But we don't use the intentional stance on a stone's movement. For things that are not as complex as humans but are also complex, we also use the intentional stance. For example, we use the intentional stance on a chimpanzee in the zoo, right? We say, a chimpanzee named Jerry went to grab this banana because he wanted to eat this banana. Right? This is a kind of intentional association. Okay, having talked about Jack, and having talked about Jerry, let's talk about AI. Do we need to use intentional association for AI? Of course we do. Aren't there already quite a few people who adopt intentional association toward their robot vacuum cleaners at home? They feel that this robot vacuum is like a family member. So for that kind of even more complex AI, using the intentional stance on it can bring us greater benefits. It allows us to use very concise and easy to understand language to explain and predict its actions. For example, if I play Go with AlphaGo and it beats me, we ask, how did it win? We won't say, AlphaGo's CPU and GPU transistors underwent such and such physical movements, retrieved a whole set of neural networks trained through deep learning methods over many years, and then combined various probability calculations, blah blah blah, to make this move. We won't speak like that. It's too much effort. We will say, AlphaGo is very good at playing chess, and it wanted to win this game, so it made such a brilliant move and defeated me. Right? Saying it this way is very economical, very convenient. Same logic. Why did an AI autonomous car suddenly brake? We won't say anything about GPU, computing power, neural network machine learning, etc. That can't explain it clearly. We will say, because this car didn't want to hit a person, and a person suddenly darted out on the road ahead, so this car braked urgently and stopped. Similarly, if an autonomous car hits someone, we say, this AI car, when identifying the road ahead, was negligent for a moment and mistook the pedestrian wearing white clothes for the shadow of a billboard. When it got close and discovered it was actually a person, and wanted to brake urgently, it was too late to dodge and hit this pedestrian. It's just that simple. Okay, back to the point. Since subjectivity is attributed, should we attribute subjectivity to AI? Hage believes, of course we need to. The premise is that this AI system becomes increasingly complex. Then we need to use the intentional stance to view and explain the AI's actions, thereby attributing a kind of subjectivity to the AI. The benefit is that this allows us to use very concise and easy to understand language to explain and predict the actions of this complex system. And looking at it this way, when an AI car hits someone, it's very easy to clarify its responsibility. Like we just said, it mistook the pedestrian for a billboard shadow. It acted out of negligence, causing this traffic accident. Then it has to bear this responsibility. It has to be punished. For example, punish it by sending it back to the factory for overhaul, and ban it from the road for half a year. Or if the consequence is serious, punish it with a lifetime ban from the road. Or even destroy it directly. Hearing this, you might feel that punishing an AI feels a bit weird. Does this AI fear being punished? If an autonomous car kills someone due to a serious recognition error, will the family of the deceased feel relieved or comforted when we destroy it? Doesn't this feel a bit like when a child slips and hits a rock, sitting on the ground crying wah wah? At that time, the mother coaxes the child saying, "It's all this rock's fault, it's all this rock's fault. Let's beat this rock to death." Then the child stops crying. But we adults are not children. You go punish an autonomous car that killed someone, even if you tear it into 8 pieces, draw and quarter it. The family of the deceased won't feel comforted. At this time, Professor Hage asks, when a person causes harm to others, why do we make this person bear the corresponding responsibility, or even punish this person? Regarding this question, there are 2 opposing theories. One is retributivism. 2 is consequentialism. Retributivism says that we make a person take responsibility or be punished because they deserve to be punished. Because they did something wrong, so they ought to be punished. Actually, this is what we common folks often call a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye, or a life for a life. Right? If you kill someone, you have to pay with your life. Even if you paying with your life benefits no one, you still ought to pay with your life. The so-called consequentialism says that we make a person take responsibility or be punished to bring more benefits in the future, or cause less harm. For example, preventing crime, right? For example, we punish a thief to make him dare not steal again in the future. And to let people who originally intended to steal see, letting them know that stealing gets punished, so let's not steal. Hage believes that retributivism is a wrong and outdated theory. Hage supports consequentialism and criticizes retributivism. Where is retributivism wrong? Retributivism looks backward. It looks to the past. Because you did something wrong in the past, and you ought not to have done so in the past, therefore we need you to take responsibility and be punished. But can the past be changed? The past cannot be changed. What we can change is the future. Therefore, we should not adopt the stance of retributivism looking backward, but should adopt the stance of consequentialism looking forward, looking to the future. See what good consequences can be caused in the future. We make the person who made a mistake take responsibility and be punished to learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones, and cure the sickness to save the patient. It is to make him learn a lesson and not commit it again in the future. We make people take responsibility and be punished to get better consequences in the future. This is a consequentialist way of thinking. Speaking back to this, previously some people questioned that we can't feel comfort from the process of tearing a smart machine into pieces. This is a retributivist way of thinking. This is wrong. Do we make autonomous cars take responsibility and be punished just to retaliate against smart machines? Of course not. We endow autonomous cars with subjectivity and make them bear responsibility to make them become better in their future behaviors. If it makes a mistake, for example, hitting someone, we make it take responsibility and be punished. This is for it to learn a lesson and not hit people again in the future. Some people ask, how does this AI robot know it should learn a lesson? This is a programming issue. It roughly means that when the programmer writes the code, they write it in. If I make a mistake, I will be held responsible and punished. Write it into the code, and then this AI robot will care more about not making mistakes. For example, care more about not hitting people. And this will further initiate a kind of evolution. That is, once I hit someone, I have to take responsibility and be punished. So to avoid responsibility and punishment, I must further avoid hitting people. Doesn't this make the safety of autonomous cars better and better? In the end, let's summarize Hage's view. AI artificial intelligence can not only possess subjectivity but also be capable of bearing responsibility. Because subjectivity is attributed. And attributing subjectivity to AI is also beneficial. It allows us to use concise and easy-to-understand language to explain and predict AI's actions. And AI bearing responsibility can also make AI's future actions better. Okay, having introduced the view of the car school, let's introduce the critique of the car school. The critique of the car school first says, using the intentional stance on autonomous cars and treating them as a person is very strange. And it's not simply using the intentional stance like we treat plush toys at home as people, but viewing this autonomous car as a moral subject. The kind that can bear moral responsibility. The kind that if it makes a mistake, it has to take responsibility and be punished in the future. But this is so weird. Because we will always ask, is this autonomous car afraid of accepting punishment? Generally speaking, for a thing to become a moral subject, there are two standards. It depends on whether it possesses two sense and sense. Let's tentatively call the first sense feeling, sentience/qualia. And the other sense cognition, perception/sapience. What is feeling, sense? It is the ability to personally feel a sensation from a first-person perspective. For example, feeling a kind of pain. This kind of feeling cannot be fully described by language. Philosophers call this ability to feel qualia. What is cognition, sense? It is our ability to use advanced intelligence to think. For example, reasoning, reflection, and having self-awareness. It is usually believed that many animals possess feeling but do not possess cognition. Only humans possess cognition. This is the difference between humans and animals. So we treat humans as moral subjects but do not view animals as moral subjects. But now you talk about this AI robot. It's very likely it won't develop either sense. So how can we talk about becoming a moral subject and bearing moral responsibility? At this time, Professor Hage would respond. Didn't I say it before? Subjectivity is not independently real, it is attributed by us. This is somewhat similar to the spirit of the Turing test. To determine if a machine possesses a human-like mind, we shouldn't ask what advanced algorithms this machine is written with, or whether it has actually written out the two senses. Don't ask this. Just let people communicate with it so that people feel it is like a person. Right? The meaning is that subjectivity is externally endowed. Perhaps opponents would respond, even if we accept Hage's statement that subjectivity is externally endowed. Even if we admit that eventually, we will build an AI that looks as if it really possesses a personality, so much so that we can hardly avoid attributing subjectivity to it. But the premise is, it still needs us to attribute subjectivity to it. So, it needs to behave consistently complex enough. For example, this autonomous car really acts as if it is afraid of punishment. Only then would we feel that endowing it with moral subjectivity is not a strange thing. But building this kind of machine that looks like it really fears punishment, even if theoretically feasible, achieving it technically is too difficult. It cannot be achieved in the foreseeable future. So for something that is only theoretically feasible but cannot be achieved in the foreseeable future, this is similar to science fiction. So what is the use of raising this sci-fi view? Okay, this is the critique of the car school. Having introduced the car school's view and its critique, let's introduce the view of the suspension school. Actually, the formal structure of our episode today is discussing the different standpoints of the manufacturer school and the owner school. It is a local 1v1 debate. The so-called local means these two schools both admit the problem thrown out by the Veto School is indeed a problem. For example, the responsibility gap dilemma. The manufacturer school and the owner school also think it is indeed a problem. The Veto School thinks this dilemma is an ethically unacceptable consequence, so we should veto the development of autonomous cars. But the manufacturer school and the owner school believe these problems are solvable. And they can be solved through traditional ethics and morals. Either view the car hitting someone as an extension of the manufacturer, or view it as an extension of the owner. Of course, the car school also burst out in the middle, inventing a new moral subject to let the car bear the responsibility, solving the responsibility gap dilemma. In short, they are all trying to convince the Veto School that this responsibility gap can be solved with traditional, or slightly modified, ethics. You, the Veto School, shouldn't go so far as to veto the development of autonomous cars, right? But the suspension school, also known as the shelf school, breaks directly with the Veto School. They say, what responsibility gap dilemma proposed by the Veto School? It is not an ethically unacceptable consequence at all. It is not a problem at all. We just suspend, shelf, these problems, and then there is no problem. If you say the car school has proposed a new ethic, endowing AI with subjectivity, this new ethic is still proposed within the framework of trying to uphold the traditional moral intuition of every debt has a debtor. But the suspension school? They don't even want this framework. They directly suspend the old ethics. It's equivalent to saying, sir, times have changed. What is the essence of this old ethic? It is actually finding the bad guy. Once an unexpected accident happens, we insist on finding a bad guy to take the blame. This also belongs to an outdated conspiracy theory mindset. Why did this bad thing happen? There must be a bad guy intentionally causing trouble, right? Even if not bad, they are stupid. Anyway, either stupid or bad. Blame them, eliminate them, and the problem is solved. However, this old ethic of finding the bad guy can no longer adapt to the AI era at all. If an autonomous car hits someone, and you insist on arguing clearly whose responsibility it is, you can't argue it clearly. Just like the disputes between the several schools mentioned above. Is it the manufacturers? The owners? Or the cars? All make sense, and all have fatal loopholes. So the problem lies precisely in: why do you insist on arguing this matter clearly? From the beginning, you were led astray by the Veto School's rhythm. The problem of the responsibility gap, we can just ignore it. If the autonomous car hits someone, it hits someone. Why insist on finding someone to take the blame? Of course, this doesn't mean no money is paid for hitting someone. Compensation must still be paid for hitting someone. But you shouldn't argue about whose fault it is. Nor say who exactly should pay this money. Just pay the money directly. Where does this money come from? The suspension school believes that at the technical level, this is easy to operate. For example, everyone agrees that the money is uniformly paid by the manufacturer. Right? When you sell the car, sell it a little more expensive, and spread the money to be used for compensation inside. Or it is uniformly paid by all car owners. Or manufacturers and owners both pay a tax to the government. Once someone is hit, the money is uniformly paid by the government. Right? If the government pays, it means everyone paid. In short, the goal is to blur the question of which specific natural person should be responsible. No specific subject is responsible anymore. Anyway, just pay the compensation. Note, this is different from traditional insurance buying. For example, in the traditional case of human driving, I, as a driver, hit someone with my car. Although the insurance company will pay the injured or the deceased's family for me. Although this money is not paid by me. But the responsibility is still mine. It is still me, as the party at fault, who caused the other party to be hit. The insurance company paying for me is equivalent to all of us car owners agreeing to pay an insurance premium before buying a car, and then if anyone hits someone later, we use this money to help him compensate. But the fault is still mine. This does not affect the fact that the driver who hits someone is the responsible person. The meaning of the suspension school is, not only is the money not paid by me, the responsibility is not mine either. The responsibility is not anyone's. We can't explain whose responsibility it is. So let's not ask whose responsibility it is. Let's just pay the money. If we no longer follow the moral intuition of every injustice has a perpetrator, every debt has a debtor, we don't need to insist on finding a specific moral subject to bear the responsibility. Then the responsibility gap problem dissolves. If we do not pursue the moral responsibility of any specific subject, this simultaneously solves the moral luck problem mentioned earlier. If the owner bears the responsibility, the owner did nothing, so why should the 1/100,000 probability event of hitting someone happen to the car they bought and make them bear the responsibility? This is obviously unfair. If the manufacturer bears the responsibility, it actually faces this unfair moral luck problem too. The suspension school advocates no need to find anyone to bear the responsibility. Then isn't this moral luck problem also suspended? Hearing the suspension school's view, you might feel this new ethic violates human intuition a bit too much. It makes people too alienated, living too twistedly. We humans have some moral intuitions and moral emotions born of instinct. An innocent person was hit and killed, we naturally, instinctively want to find out who made the mistake. How can you, the suspension school, say suspend this moral instinct and just suspend it? The suspension school would say, humans actually have no unchanging moral essence. Human ethics and morals have always been changing. They are always mutating. This is moral evolution. Technological progress changes human survival environments, so human ethics and morals must change accordingly. Otherwise, human society cannot develop. Take the simplest example. Nowadays, everyone has a smartphone. But rarely do acquaintances call directly without saying hello on WhatsApp first, right? Who calls our phones directly nowadays? Couriers, food delivery guys, various sales pitches. Or telecom scams call us directly, right? If acquaintances call directly, this is a rude behavior that causes resentment, right? Because this requires you to respond to the other party on the spot. But think about it, isn't this rule, this ethic, something that only appeared in the last few years? In the era before WhatsApp and Facebook, there was no such ethic. Actually, humans are originally animals that constantly twist themselves. If you insist that humans must live according to their so-called nature, then humans would still be living in a jungle society of war of all against all. British philosopher Thomas Hobbes proposed the social contract theory in his masterpiece Leviathan. He said that in the past, everyone was the direct defender of their own rights. Whoever bullied me, I would fight back directly myself. We were all executioners of private justice. A tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye fits our moral intuition best. But the price of civilization is that people must constantly suspend their moral intuitions. For example, we all agreed to hand over this so-called instinctive right of tooth for tooth, eye for eye to a public institution. That is the government. Everyone has to suspend this moral intuition. If someone bullies me in the future, I can't fight back directly. Right? If I lose the fight, I go to the hospital. If I win, I go to jail. I have to endure. I have to call the police. Let the police fight back for me. When the police fight back for me, it's not satisfying at all. Evidence collection by public security, prosecution, and courts, trials, and guaranteeing the other party's human rights. Even if the evidence is solid, they don't make the other party kneel down and admit their mistake to me, then chop off one of their fingers as a warning to others. They just lock him in prison. Right? This doesn't fit our intuition of wanting immediate revenge at all. It makes people feel very twisted. But this is the price of the development of civilization. Actually, Hobbes' contract theory can also be analogized to the situation of autonomous cars hitting people. One essence of contract theory is that when we punish crime, we no longer seek which specific natural person satisfies this revenge addiction. Instead, we form a kind of public personality to punish crime. Regarding compensation in autonomous car accidents, we no longer agonize over exactly which specific natural person made a mistake. Instead, the society as a whole compensates the victim. This is a fundamental spirit of social contract theory. That is, the fundamental purpose of our social life is not to satisfy cravings for revenge, but to establish order. It is to extricate people from the chaotic state of war of all against all. Actually, this is also a fundamental spirit of modern law. That is, law does not discuss right and wrong. The function of law is dingfen zhizheng, settling disputes and stopping conflicts. Rather than being placed there to satisfy your moral fetish of wanting to find a bad guy. So, once an autonomous car hits someone, it hits someone, right? The government pays money to comfort the victim, and that's enough. There is no need to insist on arguing clearly who is right and who is wrong. To summarize the suspension school's view, human ethics and morals are always changing. So now that the new era has arrived, we no longer need to abide by the old ethic of every debt has a debtor. We need to suspend it. Once an autonomous car hits someone, let's not struggle with whose responsibility it is anymore. Pay the money, and it's done. Okay, having introduced the suspension school's view, let's introduce the critique of the suspension school. The critique of the suspension school mainly comes from the veto school we introduced at the very beginning. Right? As we said before, on a local level, the manufacturer's school and the owner's school are diametrically opposed. Then on a higher level, the veto school and the suspension school are diametrically opposed. So the criticism of the suspension school mainly comes from the veto school. Just like when the veto school expressed their views earlier, it already counted as a critique of the suspension school. Simply put, human nature is not something that changes just because you say so, like the suspension school claims. Human moral instincts are not something that can be suspended just because you say so. Even if autonomous driving technology can improve human utility overall. For example, making fewer traffic casualties. But if its cost is making our human society's ethics, morals, and legal systems twisted to be incompatible with human nature, then we would rather not improve those utilities. Similar logic often appears in debates about abolishing the death penalty. From the perspective of benefits, we can calculate that sentencing to death brings fewer benefits or abolishing it brings more. For example, avoiding killing the wrong person in unjust cases. And keeping the criminal alive allows him to contribute to society in prison. For example, the death penalty might actually reduce the law's deterrent function against criminal behavior. Right? Since it's death anyway, might as well do something big. However, many people believe that one reason alone can refute the abolitionist school. That is, a life for a life, killing pays with life, is the moral intuition of the vast majority of common folks for millions of years. Let's not talk about whether this moral intuition is right or wrong. Just say, after catching a murderer, if you don't make him pay with his life but keep him alive. This is something we common folks instinctively cannot accept. Similarly, every injustice has a perpetrator, every debt has a debtor is the same as a life for a life. They are both our common folks' moral intuitions. This thing isn't something you can just suspend because you say suspending it brings more benefits. Actually, the suspension school's advocacy to suspend our human moral intuition will also cause the alienation of humans by technology. The critics of the suspension school, namely the Veto School, are not necessarily opposing the development of technology here, but rather saying that the premise of technological development is human centrism, putting people first. The development of technology should comply with human original nature. It should allow human nature to be displayed. Human nature is the end, purpose. Technology is only the means. You can't reverse it. Making humans twist themselves to adapt to technology. If you make human nature distorted and morals completely lost, what is the significance of developing technology? For example, we all know gene editing technology is very good. Cloning technology is very good. Right? Developed countries now face the situation where women don't like to have children. Then let's just use technical means to clone humans. But such a society is too terrifying. We humans become the means of technology. Once humans become the means and technology becomes the end. What will this cause? This will cause the dissolution of humanism, causing the death of man. We humans will no longer live in this world as living, flesh and blood people. Once technology becomes the end, all of us become small components in the big machine or big system created by modern technology. We are profit-maximizing, mediocre machine components that need not bear any responsibility. Right? The moral subject is cancelled. That means the concept of human itself is dead. We are just components maintaining the system's operation. Let's speak back to autonomous driving. For example, an autonomous car hits and kills someone. This is just a small bug in the operation of the modern big machine. This has nothing to do with any machine component. No one did anything wrong in this matter. This is just a person who had to be sacrificed to maintain the operation of the big system. The system as a whole will pay him money, and that's it. The system still has to continue evolving. And if we approve of the suspension school's view, the development of autonomous driving technology is this kind of alienation of humans by technology. Having talked about the problem of technological alienation, let's look at the problem of moral luck. Previously mentioned, the suspension school claims to be able to suspend the moral luck problem. But can it really be suspended? The suspension school is very arrogant. Not only do they want to alienate human nature and suspend the responsibility gap problem, they also say they can suspend the luck factor in the human world. According to the concept of age of regret proposed by British philosopher Bernard Williams, it says, as a human driver driving, even if I completely obey traffic rules, but I hit and killed a child crossing the road. Even if looking at traffic rules, it is completely the other party's fault. I don't need to bear any legal responsibility. I don't need to pay any money. This is completely a problem of luck. Simply put, just bad luck. But it is impossible for me to act as if nothing happened. I will have a kind of first-person age of regret that I cannot get rid of. I will feel bad. I will be sad. I will have regrets. I will feel remorse. After all, this child died under the car I was driving. Then this kind of age of regret is a human moral intuition. It means even if I have no fault, luck is unshakable. I hit and killed a child due to luck, I simply cannot suspend this regret. According to the suspension school's view, you can also suspend this age of regret. Right? If I am the owner sitting inside this autonomous car, the car suddenly stopped. What happened? I look, oh, it hit and killed a child. This has nothing to do with me. This is a small price for the operation of the big system. Pay money if money is owed. And I just act like nothing happened, pat my butt and leave? Let the suspension school try to suspend this age of regret for me. You shouldn't suspend it, and you cannot suspend it, right? We find it hard to believe that human nature can be twisted to this extent. That is, watching a person being killed, and then acting like nothing happened. If the suspension school can really achieve this, then that is truly the distortion of human nature. Let's use the last part to summarize the criticism. In order not to cause the distortion of human nature and the alienation of humans, we must fill the responsibility gap brought by autonomous cars hitting people. If it cannot be filled, we should not develop and popularize autonomous cars. The suspension school wanting to suspend the responsibility gap problem is not only something that shouldn't be done, but also something that cannot be done. Okay, having introduced the suspension school's view and continued with the criticism. Next, we enter the meeting summary of this autonomous car liability attribution seminar. Let's use the mind map to speak. The Veto School first threw out this big problem: autonomous cars hitting people causes the dilemma of the responsibility gap, which is an ethically unacceptable consequence. So they advocate vetoing the development and popularization of autonomous cars. And the following manufacturer school, owner school, and car school responded, yes, 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 this responsibility gap proposed by the Veto School is indeed a difficult problem. But it is not insoluble. In the view of these three schools, the autonomous car that hits someone is either an extension of the manufacturer, or an extension of the owner, or it is a moral subject itself. So the responsibility gap dilemma is solved. But the suspension school, which appeared last, doesn't think the responsibility gap problem thrown out by the Veto School at the beginning is a problem at all. They believe that with the development of technology, we need to suspend the old ethic of insisting on finding a bad guy to take the blame. The answers of the 5 schools introduced today regarding the responsibility attribution of autonomous cars hitting people. Which one do you think makes more sense? Or do you have a better solution to this problem? Welcome to join the philosophers in the discussion of this big question. Their views have been expressed. Now it's your turn to speak. Please express your views in the comments section below the video. Thank you for watching until here. I believe you are also a friend who likes to think and is full of imagination. I hope you like, subscribe, and share my program. I look forward to seeing you next time.